Western nations have never presented the reputation of military rule in Africa to be good. This is due to the legacy of instability and disarray that previous African military regimes have imposed on their nations. Maybe this is the reason why some people are hesitant to trust the Sahelian military leaders. However, Burkina Faso President Traore is altering this story. Traore is adding something special that some claim can only be found in a civilian government, whereas most military governance is more about strategy, discipline, and order. President Traore recently visited Barsalagho, one of Ouagadougou's most significant municipalities. However, this was no ordinary visit. Traore came to accomplish a remarkable feat. What then did he do? Let's investigate. In case you haven't heard, a few months ago, the village of Barsalagho in Burkina Faso grabbed headlines following a terrible attack by terrorist groups. One of Burkina Faso's most significant towns is Barsalagho, due to the fact that it is home to the last remaining military unit between terrorist organizations and Ouagadougou, the capital. Unfortunately, terrorists launched a horrifying attack on it, killing over 309 people and injuring numerous more. But you know what? The attack on Barsalagho was not your typical terrorist act. Consider it. What made the terrorists' attack on a town so close to the capital city successful? How could the Burkina Faso soldiers have missed them? This could only have occurred as a result of an inside job. Unfortunately, it is true that the Barcelona attack was orchestrated from within. While President Traore has been putting a lot of effort into improving national security and ensuring the safety of the populace, some internal forces motivated solely by power and self-interest have been working behind his back to undermine everything. A couple weeks have passed since the Barsalagho attack. That a deadly plot to destabilize Burkina Faso was discovered by the Burkina Faso military, led by Traore. The revelation that the Barsalagho attack was a part of this murderous conspiracy was even more surprising than this. The sources state that some Burkina Faso civilians, military personnel, and former military officials, all of whom have the backing of Western intelligence agencies, are implicated in this conspiracy. The conspiracy also encompassed Burkina Faso's economic operators and civil society actors. This indicates that everything was internal. The scheme also involved those individuals, particularly Burkina Faso lawmakers who have been calling for a return to civilian governance. Tell me, how can a nation be ruled in peace and progress by people with such a demonic mindset? In actuality, these individuals would collaborate with Traore to strengthen Burkina Faso's security, which is of the highest importance, if they genuinely wanted the best for the country. However, Burkina Faso and its people are not genuinely important to these individuals. As you can see, the majority of Burkina Faso's population is most impacted by the nation's insecurity. Far from the fear of terrorism, these politicians and military officials reside in their large villas in the cities. Should the situation worsen, they can even afford to fly. They could easily sacrifice the residents of Barsalagho for their own self-interest because of this. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. The plot's most startling aspect was that it was planned by Paul-Henri Damiba, the former head of Burkina Faso's military dictatorship, who was overthrown by President Traore. It's interesting to note that Damiba was abroad at the time of the incident. You see, Damiba fled to Togo in search of safety and immunity after Traore overthrew him. He had been there the entire time, furious with Traore. Thus, he made the decision to devise a scheme to depose Traore. It would be somewhat plausible if it was only a plot to stage a coup that would depose Traore. Damiba recognized that Traore had the backing of Burkina Faso people. Hence, he was unable to just come up with such a straightforward plan. He therefore made the decision to undermine that support by instilling fear in the populace and spreading the myth that Traore was unfit to rule. This was the entire rationale behind the attack on Barsalagho. Damiba attempted to establish the idea that Traore's military approach was failing by invading a town near Burkina Faso's capital. However, this only succeeded because Damiba still has sympathizers among Burkinabe politicians and the Burkinabe military. As you can see, one of Damiba's first actions as president was to raise his own and his fellow ministers' salaries. It is clear from this that he is a corrupt individual who would exploit Burkinabe public cash to further his own agenda. Upon his removal, that they would want him to return is not surprising, considering several of those ministers stayed in Burkina Faso. They would have access to riches and power that they did not have during Traore's authority if Damiba were to regain power. As you may remember, ministers' wages were drastically reduced during Traore's tenure, and the money was allocated to other development initiatives. It should come as no surprise that those Burkinabe politicians worked with Damiba. Damiba most likely assured them that if he came back to power, civilian rule would resume. All these politicians want is a return to civilian government so they can keep things the way they are. Fortunately, however, Traore and his devoted staff managed to unearth everything. The investigations claim that these ministers and former military officials who collaborated with Damiba reached out to the terrorist organization JNIM and provided them with the intelligence they needed to launch an attack on Barsalagho. Just think of that. The group has a tactic of appealing to populations that consider themselves marginalized, like the Tuareg and Fulani people, and taking advantage of social and local tensions in the areas it controls. To put it another way, these men visit local areas that frequently feel excluded from national events and are not influenced by the government. As soon as JNIM members arrive in these villages, they incite hatred toward the government, pledge to defend and support them, and arm them with weapons to attack anybody who opposes them. The local populace is frequently compelled to comply, even if they don't want to, because refusing could be fatal. As a result, these JNIM members assimilate into local communities, serving as leaders and even getting married there. Numerous security analysts who have watched and examined their actions and strategies have attested to this. As per these analysts, JNIM also targets government facilities, such as power plants and water storage facilities. They then function as a government in these regions, offering facilities to the residents, negotiating contracts with local authorities, and enlisting members of those communities to increase their numbers. Numerous large-scale attacks in Burkina Faso and Mali have been carried out by JNIM, which targets not only the local population, but also the military and anyone it believes to be supportive of the national government. In order to attack the town of Barsalagho, Damiba's allies approached this organization. Additionally, investigations showed that before they were apprehended, they intended to target military installations in Mangadara, the Ouagadougou airport, the presidential palace, and a drone site. Will a truly good leader who sincerely cares about his people's interests do such things? No, is the response. The residents of Barsalagho have now been brought under control following the attack. Live in constant fear of assault. They have always thought they were safe from terrorist assaults, so this makes sense. However, everything changed after the strikes a few months ago. Traore now issued a message of comfort to the residents of Barsalagho and the military defending the town following the attacks. However, Traore believed that a message alone was insufficient. He therefore made the decision to visit Barsalagho. However, it was more than just a visit to observe the dire circumstances. Traore's visit to Barsalagho was intended to inspire optimism and reaffirm his dedication to the town's citizens and soldiers. Everyone who heard Traore's speech was moved by his calm resolve and his abandonment of his usual military command voice. Despite the progress that has been made, more needs to be done in terms of security. Traore began his speech to the soldiers. He continued by advising them to remain watchful and let go of previous setbacks. The fact that they were able to uncover the plot and prevent any more harm is a great victory that should be celebrated. Traore continued by reminding them of their responsibility to keep the citizens of Burkina Faso safe from harm and encouraging them to keep their hope alive. Traore's speech struck a chord with both the soldiers and the people of Barsalagho. After his visit, the once subdued town of Burkina Faso has come alive, with the soldiers now having the motivation and enthusiasm to continue their work while the people have started to go about their daily lives. This is remarkable. President Traore is not your typical military leader. His visit to Barsalagho demonstrates his emotional commitment to the people. Many people believe that the military is all about governing like a dictator. Therefore, it is not surprising that when Traore's transition government wanted to end in June, the people of Burkina Faso came out to support him. The Burkinabe people have loved Ibrahim Traore's leadership so much that on May 11, thousands of Burkinabes gathered at the municipal stadium in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, to show their support for Traore's extension of the transition period. This was a historic event because it is extremely uncommon in African countries for citizens to take to the streets in large numbers to demand that the current government continue to rule. In fact, it has never happened in the last 20 years. What's interesting is that the thousands of people who attended included not only locals, but also activists and tourists from neighboring Sahel countries. If that were the case, he wouldn't be able to sway people outside of Burkina Faso, including activists inside and outside the country, who came to support Traore because they knew how dedicated and committed he is to his country. Why didn't the Western media cover this news? This only serves to demonstrate how these media outlets manipulate coverage of African nations to suit the interests of Western nations. On the other hand, if citizens united to demand the end of Traore's regime and an early transition to civilian rule, you can be sure that Western media would be the first to pick it up and distribute the information all over the world. Burkina Faso obviously doesn't want the world to know that they adore their military president and don't want a civilian one, as that would demonstrate that democracy, which has always been hailed by Western nations as the best form of government for any country, may simply not be the best. However, they forget that it has nothing to do with the system of governance, but rather with the type of leader. Democracy, monarchy, or communist systems of government play no role. On the eve of the rally, Rasman Sowadogo, chief coordinator of the Burkina Faso Black African Defense League, stated that for Africans who have suffered for decades under democratic governments, a strong, patriotic leader who is willing to defend their interests is more important. And President Traore has been doing just that since taking office. Sowadogo also urged Burkinabes to exercise caution and forewarned his countrymen about hostile elements attempting to disrupt the demonstration. There will be consequences for any effort to interfere with the event. Any assault on this event is an assault on Colonel Ibrahim Traore and his administration, he stated, and therefore on the sovereign people of Burkina Faso. Such acts will be considered a betrayal of the state and will be severely punished. The Burkina Faso National Coordination Body for the National Initiative said the rally should be a historic and celebratory event. This means that a lot of preparation went into holding the rally. On the day of the vote, thousands of Burkina Faso locals, activists, and visitors from other countries came to support Traore's government. As reported by an African Initiative correspondent, the organizers of the rally consider the elections unacceptable for maintaining peace in the country and are calling for constitutional reform for the complete liberation and revitalization of the country. Local civil society leaders shouted, "We don't want to hear another president. We don't want elections." But why? Well, since the death of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso has suffered under the rule of incompetent and greedy leaders who only cared about their own interests and those of the West. But since Traore came to power, he has set the nation on a great path. Just take a look at what he has accomplished in Burkina Faso, particularly in the agricultural sector. Ghislaine Dabiri, a member of the National Coordination of Citizens Watch Associations, stated that Burkina Faso is moving directly toward food self-sufficiency with the purchase of a large number of tractors, plowing equipment, seeds, and agricultural inputs for the 2025 agricultural campaign. For over 60 years, the people of Burkina Faso have been told that certain crops, like wheat, could not be produced there. However, under Captain Ibrahim Traore, Burkina Faso is now on the list of countries that produce wheat. But that is not all he has accomplished in the country's agricultural sector. In 2023, Traore launched two major agricultural programs, the Agro-Pastoral Offensive and the Presidential Initiative for Food Self-Sufficiency. And a number of measures were put in place to accomplish the goals of these programs. In February 2024, an emergency project was started in partnership with the African Development Bank Group to increase agricultural production in Burkina Faso, providing $38.4 million to ensure Burkina Faso's food security amid the growing impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In March, Traore spent 78 billion CFA francs on buying farm machinery, such as tractors, and agricultural inputs, such as seeds and fertilizer, rather than a fancy car, as other leaders do. This unwavering commitment to the agricultural sector is the result of Traore's vision of a Burkina Faso that is self-sufficient in its food supply. In addition to agriculture, Traore is working to increase the potential of the country's mining sector. In order to bring order to the gold mining industry, Traore banned the export of gold and constructed a gold refinery and a mine waste plant that will help create value and jobs for the people of Burkina Faso. Like his leader Thomas Sankara, Traore has rejected the presidential salary and cut the salaries of Burkina Faso's politicians, arguing that it is unfair that a small number of people are earning millions of CFA francs, while millions of people in the country are struggling to buy the necessities of life. He also stated that the entire system needs to be balanced and fixed in order for society to be stable. In terms of security, Traore has been working hard to make Burkina Faso safe again by acquiring military equipment and weapons, equipping soldiers, and collaborating with other armies, such as Russia and the Sahel Alliance. Regardless of what some may say, Traore is the best leader Burkina Faso has had in recent memory. He may be a military leader, but his dedication to the country's development is exactly what the people of Burkina Faso need right now. It is no surprise that Burkina Faso was ranked as one of the best-governed countries in Africa in the Global Governance Index earlier this year, outperforming many other countries with civilian governments. The results do not lie. Do you think Ibrahim Traore will be able to end terrorism in the Sahel? Is collaborating with Russia a safe choice? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.